Security disabled the motion sensors, but something kept walking past the ICU doors. Tonight's stories are reported as they were experienced. Keep the lights on. You're listening to Paranormal Stories. I start with the kind of night that turns a hospital into a maze of humming machines and long, empty hallways. It's after midnight and I'm a float nurse pulled to the ICU because a flu wave has burned through half the staff. The unit is at capacity except for one bed, bed 12, freshly cleaned after the patient transferred out at 10 p.m. Housekeeping left it crisp, sheets tight as a drum, monitor silent, room dark. If you've ever worked nights, you know the soundtrack. The soft drip of IV pumps, the distant metallic clack of an elevator gate, shoes whispering over waxed linoleum. Around 1:13 a.m., I pass bed 12 and notice it. The pulse socks on the wall, off, but faintly glowing as if someone brushed the button. I chalk it up to a sticky switch and keep moving. At 1:27 a.m., the central monitor chirps. Respirations, bed 12. Impossible. The bed is empty, room light off, vitals cart unplugged from the patient network. I step inside, flip the light. The monitor flashes a drowsy 0. The air is cool and absolutely still. I touch the mattress. Cold. I say out loud, because talking to an empty room is a nurse's coping mechanism. Not tonight. I hit reset on the monitor and leave. At 1:41 a.m., the unit clerk calls, "Hey, can you look at 12? It's showing 8 breaths per minute. The camera feed, each ICU room has one, renders in bad hospital grayscale. On the screen, bed 12 looks like a postcard of emptiness. Bed centered, rails down, the blanket tucked smooth. But the green waveform is doing a lazy, tied in, tied out motion. Breathing. I go back. I check the connectors. The nasal cannula still in its plastic sleeve. The leads coiled neatly like sleeping snakes. The monitor is not connected to a patient. It shouldn't be registering anything. I unplug it from the wall. The waveform collapses, returns to a flat line. I think, great, it was phantom interference. I go chart my meds. 2 rooms down, a patient moans. I fix a kinked line, twist a valve, check the IV site. When I step back into the hall, the overhead light flickers in that tired, end-of-life way. The unit is quiet except for someone wheeling an empty gurney on the far side. The wheels echo away. I glance up at the central monitor because habit owns night shift brains. Bed 12. 10 breaths per minute. The monitor is unplugged. I walk fast this time. The room is dark again. How? I just had the light on. I hit the switch and stopped in the doorway. The blanket has a shallow dip, a shape the size of a chest and shoulders, like someone reclined and took a slow breath in, stretching the sheet a finger's width, then let it out. Not a draft, not my eyes, a smooth sink and rise. I shove the blanket back, nothing there. The ripple vanishes. The mattress gives under my palm, just a normal spring. I flatten the sheet, smooth it from top to bottom, press down and feel the cheap, plasticky hospital mattress. I'm telling myself this is static electricity. It's the HVAC. It's the way the floor vibrates when the elevator moves. I leave the overhead light on and pull the door almost closed so I can see the bright stripe across the hall from the nurse's station. Watch 12, I tell the clerk. She nods. She's been on nights for 27 years and has that look like, don't name it. We don't name things because it makes them act like they belong. At 2:03 a.m., I'm drawing labs when the clerk says, too calm, if you're free, look up. I follow her finger to the camera feed. Bed 12. The overhead light is still on, but the camera registers the room darker than it is, the way cheap cameras always fail at dusk. The blanket is rising and falling, not huge, not dramatic. The measured breath of someone sleeping too shallow. The respiratory rate tick flickers from 11 to 10. I don't say anything. We both listen to the unit. Nothing but machine beeps and the faint hush of the air system. I get practical. It's the pressure line in the mattress, I say. Some ICU beds have low air loss support. Micro adjustments can look like movement. I decide I'll prove it. I grab a 20-pound saline box from the storage closet, carry it into bed 12, plop it dead center on the mattress. There, I say to no one, now breathe for me. I step back, leave the room. On the monitor, the waveform steadies, then splits, as if two chest rises are now out of phase. The numeric breath count shivers between 3 and 7. I feel the prickly sensation that climbs your back when your animal brain thinks you're being watched. At 2:17 a.m., I'm in bed 7's room turning a patient when something taps my pager twice. It's old tech. It only vibrates. But this is 2 sharp taps like knuckles. My patient, intubated, eyes glazed with sedation, flicks his gaze over my shoulder and then back. I finish the turn fast. When I glance into the hallway, bed 12's door is open wider than I left it. The bright stripe of light is a wedge, not a line. I ask security to join me. He's new, all shoulders and quiet eyes, and he doesn't laugh when I explain. We go in together. The saline box sits where I put it. There is a soft depression beside it now, as if someone leaned an elbow there to watch the door. The air smells like lemon cleaner and old linen. He says, "We've been getting calls from the 3rd floor about an elevator stopping and opening with nobody inside." I say, "We're on 2. He shrugs. "You're not the only one awake." We decide to kill the camera feed for bed 12 temporarily and reboot the unit to clear any phantom settings. I'm reaching behind the monitor when I hear a long, careful inhale that isn't mine, isn't security's. It's so slow, it's almost a sigh dragged backwards. He hears it too because he flinches and his flashlight jerks to the side of the bed. We hold the breath we do own, like if we add no air, nothing else can either. The inhale stops, a beat. Then, right by my right ear, a whisper in the slow hush of a ventilator. "Don't turn it off." It's not a voice I recognize. It's not male or female. It is something like the memory of a voice. The flashlight swings, nothing there. I yank the power, because terror makes you dumb. Everything in the room dies to a soft electronic click. The camera goes black. We stand in absolute silence. The overhead flickers once and stays steady. I can hear my pulse down in my wrists. He says very gently, "Let's step out." We do. We stand in the bright hallway and listen. Nothing. The clerk stares at our faces and then at the dead black square where bed 12 used to be. "You did that?" she asks. "Yeah," I say. "Good," she says, "because it started charting a heart rate." At 2:33 a.m., with the unit quiet, I walk back to bed 12 alone. This time, before I go in, I say the thing my grandmother taught me to say in a house that felt wrong. You can stay if you're kind, but you can't touch. If you belonged here, I hope you found peace. If you didn't, there's none for you in this bed. I know how that sounds. Nurses pray in broom closets. We press our palms into our own sternums and count to 5 because we forgot our lunch in the car and the cafeteria closed at 8. We collect rituals the way we collect badge reels and coffee cups. I switch the monitor back on. It boots. The screen shows its little green lung icon and a number, 0. The blanket is a smooth, empty field. At 3:07 a.m., the hospital's witching minute, the time half the dead seem to favor, the elevator at the far end dings. When a door opens in the night, you feel the air change down the entire hallway, a soft pressure shift. I look up at the camera feed because habit. Bed 12 shows 2 breaths per minute, then 4, then nothing. When I step into the doorway to listen, just to prove it's all electrons and nerves, the overhead vent exhales and the blanket barely lifts, as if someone very old, very tired, remembered the motion of breathing without the need. By 5 a.m., the unit begins to wake. The lab printers chitter. The day shift coffee arrives with godlike timing. I tell the day charge what happened. She doesn't raise an eyebrow. Last winter, she says, it was bed 5. Before that, 3. Sometimes they don't know they've moved rooms. She means moved on. She pats my shoulder like you do for someone who went outside in a storm and came back soaked but whole. The clerk prints a log from the central monitor and slips it face down in my pocket with a tiny half smile. For your files, she says. During handoff, I don't mention the whisper. I write simply, intermittent phantom waveforms on bed 12, equipment rebooted, stable. And when I clock out, I walk past the elevators and take the stairs the whole way down because I am tired of doors that open when they shouldn't. Now that would have been the end of it. Except hospitals hoard the strange, the way basements hoard cold. A few nights later, while everyone else chased the usual chaos, the building decided to tell me the second story. I was bringing a patient down to imaging when the service elevator rung without being called. The indicator glowed for floor 3. But 3 has been sealed for asbestos work all month. The doors open to an empty car. No gurney, no aid, no one. I told myself I'd hit the wrong button and stepped inside because nurses ride anything that moves. The panel buttons for 3 and 4 had cloudy plastic covers snapped over them so no one could select those floors. But 3's indicator flickered anyway. A silent insistence. The car shuddered once, like it was shaking off sleep, and climbed. When it passed 2, I felt the pressure pop in my ears, like the building had stopped breathing for a second, and now remembered how. When the doors parted on 3, they opened to darkness run through with caution tape. A work light threw a pale circle on concrete dust. Drywall leaned in sheets against the walls, like gravestones waiting for names. Past the tape, against the far wall, gurney tracks. Not the fresh-edged kind either. The faint, chalky loops of wheels that rolled through dust and then circled back. I couldn't cross the tape, so I leaned as far as I could and looked left. Past a pile of drop cloths, the hallway terminated in double doors. Above them, an old sign someone forgot to take down. ICU arrow. The arrow pointed into a space that didn't exist anymore. The elevator chimed in my ear, impatient as a call bell. Going down, it said, cheerful, and it closed me in and carried me back to floors that matched the map. I got curious enough to ask facilities for their elevator logs. I expected them to laugh me off. Instead, the tech printed the call history and circled times with a Sharpie. That's after hours, he said, tapping 3:07 a.m., 2 nights in a row. Car calls from 3 with no badge swipe to access and no weight change on the sensor pad. He shrugged one shoulder. Probably a wiring ghost. He looked up like he realized what he said and grinned. That's what we call it. Wiring ghost. That's what I called it too, when I had to ride that same car at 3:12 a.m. with a respiratory therapist and a patient half asleep on a gurney. We both watched the panel like it might blink alive. It didn't. But somewhere above us, a door opened with that fast metal gasp and closed again, and the therapist quietly, without looking at me, pressed his thumb into the gurney rail like a little prayer. One more, and then you can decide how much of this is bad circuitry and how much deserves a lighter voice when you say it. It was the following week, just before shift change, when the overhead speakers crackled with a code blue. The voice came through textbook crisp, like a recorded message. Code blue, room 2-17, code blue 2-17. On the unit, everyone stops at the same time when that hits. Your heart drops, your hands move. I grabbed the crash cart and we ran. Only room 217 doesn't exist. In our ICU, the rooms stop at 214. Then the numbering jumps to the next wing. Still, the voice said it again. Code blue 217. The clerk spun the map, spun as if it would change. The charge nurse skidded to a halt and yelled, "Main floor!" Another nurse shouted back, "Maternity?" We split. I went left toward the main med-surg hallway, shoving the crash cart past confused visitors. The overhead repeated the call. 2-17. We found an empty room labeled 219 with a temporary plaque taped over the number. The bed was stripped, floor gleaming, the smell of fresh wax. No patient, no staff. The monitor on the wall was powered down. I called the operator. "We're at 219, I said. "There's no 217. She sounded rattled. We're reading the code through the old board," she said. "We decommissioned that last year." She paused, a little breath across the line. "It's reading ICU." When we got back, the charge nurse had that expression that makes your stomach float. She was holding a laminated evacuation map from before the remodel. There, on the old layout, next to where the third floor arrow still points on the service elevator sign, was a box labeled 217. ICU overflow, the room that used to be, the one that isn't anymore. The timestamp for the code, 3:07 a.m. It logged in the operator system, then blinked away like it had never been there. The operator, a woman who'd worked phones longer than I've been alive, said she'd file a trouble ticket for Phantom Page. She said the word phantom very carefully and very softly, like it might hear. That morning I walked past bed 12 and put my hand on the rail like you touch the door frame of a house you're leaving. The bed was occupied again, an elderly woman with a family who whispered and smoothed her hair and cried only in the hallway. The monitor hummed the slow wave of sleep. The blanket rose and fell for an ordinary, beloved reason. I like to think whatever needed a bed found one, or remembered it had already been moved. If you've had a night shift story, something that cleared its throat in an empty room, a code that paged from a place that isn't on the map anymore, tell it below or send it in. I'll read it here. And if you're listening on a late break under fluorescent lights, this is your reminder to drink some water, check your lines, and say out loud to no one in particular, "You can stay if you're kind." Then keep walking. Some doors open for a reason. Some you let pass you by. Thanks for staying with Paranormal Stories tonight. If this episode left a light on in your hallway, tap like so others can find it, and subscribe with the bell so you don't miss the next case. Have you lived through something you can't explain? Comment your story or send it to the email in the description. Anonymous is fine. Sleep if you can, and keep the lights on.